Just minutes ago, King Charles reportedly collapsed in private tears after reading a long, hidden, handwritten letter from Queen Elizabeth, her final words about Camilla. What was in that letter was never meant to surface. But now, its contents are echoing through the palace halls, shaking the very foundation of the monarchy and threatening to reopen wounds Charles thought had long healed. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The letter did not arrive with ceremony or warning. It surfaced quietly, almost accidentally, during the careful preparation of documents destined for a sealed legacy, vault papers meant to preserve history, not rewrite it. Yet this single envelope carried a gravity that dwarfed the rest. Marked in the Queen's unmistakable hand, addressed to Charles alone, and to be opened only after her passing, it bore the weight of years of restraint. For decades, the Queen had mastered the art of silence, choosing duty over confession, composure over candor. What she wrote, she never spoke aloud. And in that choice, she ensured that when the truth finally emerged, it would land with devastating force. Those close to the moment say Charles knew, the instant he recognized the handwriting, that this was not a letter of comfort. It was not a blessing wrapped in affection. It was something far more dangerous: honesty. The tone, reportedly colder than anyone expected, cut through him not as a king, but as a son. Lines that referenced Camilla did not soften with time. They hardened. Words measured and restrained still carried unmistakable judgment, and with every sentence, the distance between public acceptance and private truth grew wider. This was not the Queen speaking as a monarch managing optics. This was a mother reckoning with consequences she could never undo. The breakdown that followed did not happen before cameras or courtiers. It happened in isolation, behind a closed door, where titles offer no protection. A trusted valet, bound by loyalty and shaken by what he witnessed, later described a man unmoored, voice breaking, hands trembling, letter clutched as though letting go would make the words disappear. Schedules were cleared without explanation, calls went unanswered. The palace, so accustomed to control, felt briefly suspended in uncertainty, as if the past had surged forward to demand its due. And all the while, Camilla was elsewhere, carrying out her duties, unaware that the ground beneath her position had shifted. She did not know that the Queen's final words about her were no longer sealed in silence. She did not know that the man she stood beside now carried a truth he could not unlearn. In that narrow window of time, before confrontation and consequence, the monarchy hovered on the edge of revelation, balanced between what had been presented to the world and what had been hidden at all costs. But to understand why the Queen's final words carried such devastating weight, we must rewind to the hidden chapters of a fractured royal love story never told to the public. For decades, Camilla's presence in Charles's life sparked fury behind palace doors and quiet dismay from the Queen herself. While the public was fed polished narratives, what unfolded in private was a silent war between royal duty and personal desire, with Elizabeth watching from the shadows. Long before the world softened to Camilla's image, the Queen remained unmoved, resolute in her silence. After the death of Diana, when the monarchy was under immense public scrutiny, Elizabeth refused even the smallest gesture of acknowledgement toward the woman Charles had always kept close. That refusal spoke louder than words. It wasn't a gesture of malice, it was a statement of legacy. To the Queen, Diana had not only been beloved by the public, she had been the institution's last thread of dignity amid scandal. The thought of welcoming Camilla into the inner fold so soon, so publicly, was unthinkable. Time might have dulled public outrage, but it had only deepened the Queen's quiet resistance. Even as Charles tried to move forward, Elizabeth stood still. Palace aides recall the moments when Camilla was present in the Queen's vicinity as chillingly formal. One insider described the atmosphere as icy but controlled, a frost that never quite melted despite years of proximity. Charles, ever the emotional son desperate for validation, reportedly pleaded on multiple occasions for his mother to accept Camilla not as a tolerated guest, but as family. But the Queen, mindful of her legacy and the monarchy's fragile relationship with the public, was cautious. Her silences in those moments were not passive, they were loaded with disappointment and unspoken warnings. The tension reached its peak in the early 2000s, when the idea of marriage between Charles and Camilla became more than speculative. The Queen did not oppose it outright, but behind closed doors, she reportedly warned Charles of the long-term consequences of pushing forward without the full support of the Crown. Her words, though restrained, struck a nerve. The institution might survive scandal, but it would not survive dishonor. To Elizabeth, perception mattered just as much as truth, and in the court of public opinion, Camilla was still a figure of betrayal. One meeting in particular changed everything. A highly confidential discussion between Charles and his mother, away from staff and courtiers, allegedly ended in emotional chaos. Charles emerged visibly distressed, and for hours afterward, he remained secluded. Though the contents of their conversation were never disclosed, those close to the situation believe that was the moment Charles realized full acceptance from his mother would never come. What followed was a noticeable cooling between mother and son, a shift in their dynamic that never fully repaired itself. Despite this, Elizabeth never publicly voiced disapproval. That wasn't her style, but what she didn't say in life, she wrote in privacy. Letters, musings, unsent messages, those close to her, claim that she often committed her true feelings to paper when she could no longer speak them aloud. It is in those quiet records that the deepest truths lived, buried beneath the noise of public duty. The Queen's disappointment, though masked from the world, was inked in confidence, hidden in drawers, locked behind sealed envelopes meant for a future no one dared imagine. And in those private moments, the Queen began penning thoughts that would never see the light until now. Tucked inside a sealed envelope, in handwriting that had faded with time, Queen Elizabeth wrote something she never dared speak aloud. The letter remained hidden for years, protected by layers of tradition and secrecy, until one unexpected discovery blew it all wide open. It wasn't meant to be found then. The envelope lay buried among ceremonial papers and confidential family correspondence in a dim, climate-controlled chamber of the Royal Archives, an area so infrequently accessed that even the archivists tread lightly, treating its contents with reverence bordering on fear. But as the vault was prepared for a generational transition, the Queen's final directive emerged. Sealed with her private crest and addressed to Charles, "Upon my death," it carried a silence that screamed louder than 1,000 speeches. Royal protocol dictated what came next. No interference, no delay. The letter was to be delivered directly to the king. No one was to open it, redact it, or filter it through advisors. And that single rule would soon unleash the emotional reckoning Charles had long feared and never expected. Only 2 individuals had known of the letter's existence before its discovery: the Queen's private secretary and a senior royal archivist, both sworn to secrecy. For years, they had safeguarded it under orders to act only when Elizabeth's reign had ended and Charles's had officially begun. Even then, the intention was clear. It was not a political letter, not a statement for the realm, but a personal confession. A letter from mother to son, a reckoning written in ink. Sources inside the palace now confirm that the letter was penned within months of Charles's wedding to Camilla. Though Elizabeth had publicly blessed the union, eventually calling Camilla Queen Consort in a move that stunned royal watchers, this letter revealed something far more complex. Behind the smiles and public statements, behind the carefully crafted narratives, Elizabeth had been wrestling with thoughts she couldn't share aloud. Her words, described as measured but deeply personal, revealed reflections sharpened by pain and cooled by time. They were not written in anger, but neither were they written in warmth. They belonged to the realm of final truths, truths too difficult to voice, but too important to leave unsaid. The moment the envelope touched Charles's hands, something changed. According to an insider who witnessed the exchange, he stared at the seal for several minutes, unmoving, as though he could feel the weight of what lay within. When he finally opened it, his face reportedly turned ashen, his hands trembling ever so slightly. The air in the room seemed to thicken. He did not speak. He did not finish the letter in one sitting. Instead, he held it like a relic, fragile, sacred, devastating. What Elizabeth had buried in those words was more than sentiment. It was a mirror that forced Charles to see not just the man he had become, but the shadow of the son he once was, the choices he made, the hurt he caused, and the legacy he would now carry forward. The crown may have passed to him, but this letter proved that certain truths remain sovereign, untouched by ceremony. But what did the Queen write that pierced the king's heart so deeply? What truth had been buried beneath decades of silence? The Queen's letter didn't just express concern, it laid bare a quiet heartbreak. A monarch torn between love for her son and sorrow for what the monarchy had endured. Her words, though polite, revealed an emotional storm that had been kept behind closed lips for years. The weight of the crown had never silenced Elizabeth's heart, only delayed its voice. In this final act, stripped of ceremony and shielded from scrutiny, she offered Charles something the throne never permitted: unvarnished truth. She began with restraint, as monarchs do, but as the ink moved across the page, that restraint gave way to something deeper. She did not name Camilla in bitterness, but in conflict. The Queen acknowledged in writing what she had denied in words, that her acceptance had been ceremonial, not sincere. Her face may have smiled in photographs, but her soul had never forgotten the pain the institution and her son had asked the public to swallow in silence. She wrote that the nation had been asked to forgive too quickly, and without truly being asked at all. That Diana, in all her flaws, had been irreplaceable, not only to the people, but to the soul of the monarchy itself. And in those lines, Elizabeth didn't just mourn a daughter-in-law, she mourned what had been lost in the process: trust, reverence, and the emotional bond between sovereign and subject. She spoke of a rift between duty and desire, one that had splintered more than a family. It had fractured the institution's very identity. The tone was not harsh. There was no vengeance in her pen. But there was ache, unmistakable and raw, as if she had carried it with her for years, quietly, until her final breath. One passage struck Charles with undeniable force. Some wounds cannot be made right by time or ceremony. It was the kind of sentence that does not accuse, it haunts. A quiet confirmation that no matter how many titles were changed or portraits repositioned, something had been irreversibly broken. And it wasn't just the past Elizabeth was reflecting on, it was the future she feared. She urged Charles to weigh his reign not by personal peace, but by public perception, to remember that a monarch's happiness does not always align with a monarchy's survival. That love, when worn as a crown, carries a price far heavier than the gold it gleams beneath. The letter was never meant to be a weapon. It was a confession, one written in solitude, born of years of endurance, and filled with the hopes of a woman who had spent her life choosing silence over scandal. But in that silence, her words now thundered. They painted a portrait of a mother who loved deeply, but ruled cautiously, who wanted her son to be happy, but never at the cost of history. And in those lines, Charles didn't just read a letter. He relived a life, his, hers, Diana's, and the monarchy's fractured reflection staring back at him. And as Charles read those words, memories came rushing back, memories of promises, betrayal, and a love that tore the royal family in half. While the world watched Camilla transform into a queen consort, few knew of the quiet resistance from within the palace. Behind ceremonial smiles, the late queen reportedly harbored doubts she could never fully suppress, doubts that now haunt Charles in the wake of her final message. To the public, Camilla's rise appeared seamless, polished, and ultimately embraced. But within the walls of Buckingham Palace, acceptance was not freely given. It was calculated, delayed, and, in many corners, resisted. For over a decade, Queen Elizabeth hesitated. She withheld the formal endorsement of Camilla's future title, choosing instead to navigate the storm of royal perception with deliberate ambiguity. Behind closed doors, her silence on the matter spoke volumes. Those closest to the throne knew it wasn't about protocol, it was personal. And as years passed, that silence became a signal to the old guard. The Queen was not convinced. Inside the court, murmurs grew louder. There were intense debates over optics, how the public would perceive Camilla as Queen, how Diana's memory would be impacted, and what ripple effects it could have on the monarchy's image. According to one insider, Camilla once walked in on a conversation she was never meant to hear. A senior courtier, unaware of her presence, whispered, "Her Majesty will never forget Diana." Those words, sharp and echoing, stung deeper than any public protest. Because Camilla knew she could win over the people in time, but not the monarch who had once vowed to preserve tradition above all else. Even the public shift in perception, which appeared organic, was not without orchestration. Behind the scenes, royal strategists waged a relentless campaign to reframe Camilla's image. Carefully curated appearances, soft-focus media narratives, and warm interviews were all designed to make her more palatable to a world still mourning Diana. It worked for the headlines, at least. But within the palace, the emotional divide remained. The Queen watched all of this with her usual stoicism, but those closest to her could sense the tension. Her endorsement, when it finally came, felt like a formality, not a reconciliation. Only in the months leading up to her passing did the Queen release a carefully worded statement, expressing her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort when the time came. The timing was no coincidence. Pressure had mounted, both politically and within the family, to settle the matter before the transition of power. It was meant to be a gesture of unity, but the letter Charles received later would cast that gesture in a chilling new light. The Queen had given her blessing, yes, but in her own words, that blessing was duty, not desire, and that distinction changes everything. What the world saw was a crown placed on Camilla's head. What Charles now feels is the invisible weight of his mother's withheld approval. He alone must carry the knowledge that her final act was not one of full-hearted embrace, but of reluctant acceptance. A compromise made for country, not for love. The Queen's doubts had been kept out of view for years, but now, written in her own hand, they live on in the heart of her son, tearing at his conscience with every public wave, every private moment. And now, with the truth laid bare, Charles faces an impossible question: how do you carry a crown when your mother never fully accepted your queen? What happened in that private study moments after Charles read the letter was nothing short of emotional collapse. For a man trained his whole life to hide feeling behind protocol, this was the moment the mask slipped, and palace insiders are finally revealing what they saw. It began with silence. Deafening, unnatural silence from the king's private chambers. The kind of silence that alarms those who know the rhythms of royal routine. A senior valet, stationed nearby, had heard the initial rustle of papers, then nothing. And then, the sound no monarch is ever meant to make. Charles was sobbing. Not the composed weeping of a dignified sovereign, but the broken, guttural cry of a man crushed under the weight of truth he could neither challenge nor erase. Behind that locked door, the grief of a son collided with the guilt of a king. He had read his mother's final confession, and it had undone him. His personal secretary, alerted by the valet's discreet concern, approached cautiously, but when summoned, Charles said only 2 words: "Leave me." No royal command, no explanation. Just the plea of someone drowning in emotional reckoning. Minutes passed, then hours. No movement. No instructions. Eventually, when a trusted aide was permitted to enter, Charles was found seated on the floor, legs folded awkwardly beneath him, the Queen's letter clenched in his hand like a lifeline. He wasn't speaking, he wasn't moving, he was simply staring into nothing, into memory, into regret. The King's afternoon schedule, filled with briefings and meetings, was cancelled without reason. The palace did not issue a statement, nor did it need to. Those close to him knew the truth without asking. Something inside him had cracked, and whatever held his emotional armor in place had finally given way. Hours later, Charles attempted to attend a private family briefing. He arrived late, his face pale, lips pressed tight. He said nothing, not a word, just a nod to acknowledge the room, and another to excuse himself shortly after. The meeting never resumed. But the real reckoning came with nightfall. That evening, Camilla returned to the residence, unaware of what had transpired in her absence. She expected routine, not revelation. But the moment she crossed the threshold, something felt off. No greeting, no eye contact, just silence, thick with unspoken tension. Charles avoided her gaze, retreating to another room before any words could be exchanged. Aides reported that for the first time in years, the couple dined separately. No conversation, no confrontation. Just the haunting knowledge that something had shifted, something irreversible, because Charles knew. He knew what his mother truly thought. And now, he had to carry that burden while standing beside the very woman his mother could never fully embrace. The Queen's words, though composed, had exposed fault lines in his marriage, his reign, and his very sense of self. He had inherited the crown, but lost the comfort of believing his choices had ever truly been accepted. But what did Camilla know? And how would she react once she discovered the Queen's final words were not in her favor? When Camilla finally read the Queen's letter, what followed was an hour of tension no palace wall could contain. Eyewitnesses speak of raised voices, silence so sharp it chilled the air, and a confrontation that may have left lasting scars on the royal marriage. It began with hesitation, Charles clutching the letter, eyes weary, refusing to hand it over. Camilla sensed the shift the moment she walked in, felt the distance between them like a barricade. She asked what had happened. He wouldn't speak. She asked again, then again. And when he finally answered, it wasn't with words, but by placing the envelope, still partially folded, on the table between them. But he didn't walk away. He stayed. He watched. And when she read the words, line by line, her expression reportedly hardened with every sentence. The silence broke with a single question, sharp, wounded, and furious. Why didn't she ever say this to my face? Camilla, used to bearing public scrutiny with practiced grace, was blindsided by the Queen's written words. To find, after all these years, that acceptance had been a formality and not affection, that behind the ceremonies and titles, she had never been truly welcomed, was more than a blow. It was betrayal. And in that moment, Camilla turned her anger not only toward the Queen's memory, but toward the man who had withheld it. She demanded to know how long he had known. She accused him of shielding her from the truth, not out of protection, but guilt. Charles, already broken by the letter once, shattered again. He confessed to holding back, to not wanting her to see the pain woven between the lines. But it was more than that. He admitted something deeper, that even in his mother's silence, he had always suspected the truth. He had hoped that the Queen's final blessing had been a change of heart, but the letter proved it wasn't. And now, the past had caught up with both of them in a way that no crown, no protocol, no carefully scripted address could fix. Camilla lashed out, reportedly accusing Elizabeth of poisoning her legacy with shadows and dragging Diana's ghost into a future that should have belonged to them alone. She asked Charles whether he regretted marrying her, whether he thought the Queen had been right all along. He said nothing, and that silence, after everything, was enough. The atmosphere between them grew so volatile that royal aides were quietly instructed to leave the residence for the night. No official explanation, just the sound of doors closing and footsteps retreating as the heart of the monarchy convulsed behind stone walls. That night, for the first time in months, Charles and Camilla did not sleep in the same room. The palace, so used to routine and ritual, felt unsettled, its rhythm disrupted by a letter that had resurrected wounds no one was ready to face. The Queen's final words had not just cast judgment, they had exposed the fault lines buried beneath a royal marriage long held together by shared survival. And as the silence returned to those royal halls, it became clear this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the ignition point. But just when it seemed the storm might pass, an even deeper royal twist emerged from someone who had read the letter before Charles ever did. In a stunning twist, new reports suggest that someone else read the Queen's final letter before it ever reached the King's hands. Who intercepted it? Why was it delayed in delivery? And what else might have been withheld from the monarch in the final days of the Queen's life? The truth, it seems, was not just buried in a vault but quietly handled, passed and debated before it ever reached its intended recipient. When the Queen's private letter to Charles was uncovered, it did not go straight into the King's hands as royal protocol demanded. Instead, it took a detour, one shrouded in silence, and now exposed in whispers spreading through the palace like wildfire. The royal archivist who stumbled upon the sealed envelope reportedly didn't notify Charles directly. Instead, he alerted a senior royal, an unnamed figure whose identity has now become the center of growing speculation. Two names repeatedly surface behind closed doors: Princess Anne and Prince William. Both are known for their fierce loyalty to the crown, but loyalty doesn't always mean agreement, and in this case, it may have meant interference. There was, undeniably, a 2-4-hour delay between the letter's discovery and its delivery to Charles. A full day in which decisions were made quietly, urgently, and possibly with disagreement behind palace walls. Sources reveal that during this critical window, a faction within the royal household considered sealing the letter permanently, arguing that its content could do more harm than good. There were fears it would destabilize the king emotionally. Others feared it would destabilize Camilla's position publicly. Some even believed the Queen never intended for the letter to reach anyone despite her clear instruction. The arguments were heated, the stakes massive. In a moment that may have changed everything, a redacted version of the letter, edited, softened, and carefully sanitized, was prepared. It was nearly the version Charles received, but one aide, whose loyalty to both the Queen's wishes and Charles's right to truth outweighed all caution, intervened. That aide insisted the king see the original, untouched version, not because it was easy, but because it was real. Had they not spoken up, the letter that shattered the king might have arrived as a diplomatic footnote rather than the emotional earthquake it truly was. But the damage may have already been done. The very knowledge that others read the Queen's final words before Charles casts a long shadow over an already raw wound. Was it an act of protection or manipulation? Did someone attempt to shield Charles from the pain or shape how and when he experienced it? The implications go beyond emotional betrayal. They strike at the heart of palace trust, succession influence, and whether the king's grip on his own narrative has already slipped beyond his control. What else might have been filtered, delayed, or buried? What other truths lie dormant in vaults, drawers, or minds sworn to secrecy? If the Queen's final thoughts could be intercepted, what guarantees exist for the rest of Charles's reign? These are the questions now echoing through royal corridors, questions that may never receive public answers but will haunt private conscience for years to come. And as the dust settles, one question remains. What will Charles do now, knowing his mother's final words were never meant to bless the crown he shares? King Charles now stands alone, burdened with the weight of a legacy he once thought complete. His mother's last letter didn't just question Camilla, it questioned him. And as the monarchy balances between old wounds and new challenges, the king's next move may define more than just his reign. In the weeks since the letter was delivered and the storm it unleashed behind palace gates, those closest to Charles have noticed a distinct shift. He is quieter now, more withdrawn. Once eager to be seen as a modern monarch, a man of vision and vitality, Charles has become visibly burdened. His schedule, once overflowing with public engagements and symbolic outreach, has been quietly trimmed. And when he does appear, it is with a somber gravity that has not gone unnoticed. His interactions with Camilla, once filled with small, affectionate gestures, have grown distant. There are no smiles between them now, only glances exchanged with caution, as if each is waiting for the other to speak first. Aides whisper of tensions mounting behind the scenes. Discussions once settled are now being reopened. Questions about Camilla's long-term role, her titles, and her visibility within the monarchy have become the subject of careful, deliberate review. It is not a reversal yet, but it is a re-evaluation, and that alone marks a dramatic shift from the confidence that once surrounded their shared reign. Some advisors believe Charles is contemplating adjustments not out of strategy, but out of respect. Respect for the Queen's wishes. Respect for a letter that still echoes in every corner of his thoughts. Those echoes have taken physical form. Charles has reportedly commissioned a new private chapel within a royal estate. Not a grand project for public devotion, but an intimate space for private reflection. A quiet, sacred place where he can honor his mother not as queen, but as the woman who, even in silence, shaped every moment of his life. Some believe it is his way of atoning. Others say it's the only place he feels he can be the son again, not the sovereign. Either way, the message is clear. The king is haunted, and the monarchy is holding its breath. The letter now rests inside a private royal safe, untouched since that first reading. No copies have been made, no statements released. Its contents remain unspoken outside the tightest royal circle. But its impact? That cannot be locked away. Every glance from Charles, every word left unsaid, carries the weight of it. Every future decision, from who stands beside him to how history remembers this reign, will be shaped by what Elizabeth wrote in that room, long before she passed, and long before Charles was ready to hear it. The monarchy has always survived by adapting to the future, but this time it may be the past that dictates its path. For King Charles, the crown is no longer just a symbol of power or duty. It is a reminder, etched in ink and silence, that approval, even from a mother, is never guaranteed. And as he moves forward, every step will be shadowed by that truth. The Queen's words may be gone, but their echo now lives in every royal decision, and for King Charles, the crown has never felt heavier. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.